Well, here we are. This is the second time I tried to start this video, and the first time something flew in front of my lens, and I don't know what it was, but if that was you, Carolyn, thank you for joining me. Anyway, we always knew this day was going to come. I just thought you were going to hold off a little while longer because we did have some plans, and now they're kind of messed up, but I'll go on without you and do what we had talked about doing. I want to tell everybody a little bit about you that may not know or may not remember. Uh, I met you in high school, and just before the end of our junior year, and immediately became friends and stayed friends for the rest of our lives. People didn't understand our friendship because we are so very different, but there was a commonality, a strength between us that just couldn't be broken. I didn't always like your lifestyle, but you didn't always like mine. And the differences, I think, is one thing that made us stronger. I always have supported you, and I always would, no matter what, even if I thought you were wrong, which we both thought we were each wrong quite a bit. But anyway, I met you in high school, and it was about 6 months later that you actually met my brother, and I had a feeling that that was going to be the end of our friendship, and as hard as he tried, it just didn't happen. I wasn't invited to your wedding. I was the designated babysitter that day, and you guys went off to Carson City and tied the knot without me. Um, your your relationship with Richard before you got married, I remember one time when he had been not feeling well, and so he didn't go to work with my dad. And he had you on the phone and he was telling you, please bring me some Gerber baby food custard. It has to be vanilla Gerber baby food custard. And I got you on the phone and I said, don't you dare get in your car and drive all the way from Bethel Island to Brentwood just to bring him some stupid baby food. And we've got pudding here that can be made and he knows how to make it, so don't you do that. But sure enough, you showed up with several kinds of Gerber baby food because, after all, I guess he was your baby. And I always thought, wow, this is going to be a sign of the way their relationship is going to be. And sure enough, it was. And in spite of the fact that it it was said that it was never going to work, I don't know what, you were married forever. But that kind of baby food devotion seemed to go on quite a while until you finally left. But that's the way, that was an indicative of what your relationship would be, running to get him his Gerber baby food. When I spent a lot of time going back and forth across the United States, and you hated that. Carolyn hated the fact that I traveled so much and I never seemed to get settled in one place more than a year or so at a time. And every time I would come home and it would be about time for me to leave, she would pick a fight with me. And I could never understand that. Why were you fighting with me just weeks before I was going to leave? And then it was my mom who told me she's fighting with you because she doesn't want you to leave. And it's easier if you're fighting for you to go than it is if you're under good terms. So that seemed to be the way our friendship went, is that every time I had to leave town, we would be in an argument and it would be easier to go. And eventually we just simply grew to accept it. But the ironic thing is that after Carolyn left Richard, she didn't stay in one place for very long. So she kind of adopted my lifestyle of being a rolling stone. A lot of you won't remember because you were too little that there was never a child that Carolyn wouldn't take in. It didn't matter how much money they had or how much food they had or whether or not the electricity was about to be turned off or anything else. If somebody needed her to take care of their child, she was always there and she always took them in. I remember at least one or two times when between the two of us there would be 12 children around that needed to be taken care of. And I don't know how she did it, but she managed, and she managed to do it and give each child the attention that they needed and do special things with them. But with so many kids, I don't know how she did it. I mean, she had her four, and then she had Dorothy Whitney, and she had my two, and then sometimes she had Shauna, and sometimes she had Bruce's kids, except for Jeremy. And it just was like the house was an open door for kids. Which brings us to some other things that she did. I remember one time she told Lisa that if she didn't finish her dinner that she wouldn't have dessert. And Lisa looked up at her and thought for a few minutes and she said, "Well, what's for dessert?" Carolyn wasn't going to buy that. You're going to, okay, see, now there's something in front of my camera here. I don't know what it is. It's gone now. Anyway, so that's the way it was in Carolyn's household with the kids. There was never a job that she would turn down simply because she didn't know how to do it, because she would say she knew how to do it even if she didn't. And then she would go and take the job. She'd get paid great money and she'd do an excellent job at something she had no idea how to do. She did that with cartography. She had found a job doing map making. Now, remember, we'd been out of high school for more than 10 years by this time. And yes, she did take mechanical drawing and drafting in high school, but it wasn't going to prepare her to become a map maker. But she wanted the job, and the guy offered it to her. I don't know how she did it, but she always got these things offered to her. She took the job, and she did a wonderful job at it. And eventually the business closed down and she had Richard buy all the equipment so she could do cartography at home. But then once she was home and she had all the equipment set up, she just didn't feel like doing it anymore. So she changed to something else. I think from there she decided to make the velvet quilts with some company in town. But no matter what it was, she would take it on and she would do it and she would do it great. I guess that's what happens when you're the kind of kid in high school who got offered a full scholarship to study architecture in Europe, but instead decided to marry my brother and have babies. Um, but there was nothing that she couldn't do, that she wanted to do that she couldn't do. She all she had to do was think about it. I always liked bouncing my ideas off of her because I would come up with what I think would be an impossible idea, and we would discuss it. And come to find out, she'd figure out a way to make it possible. When we were living together in Upland, the company I was working for kept having me do more and more overtime, and I said I can't continue to do this, and said sure she can. She said just teach me how to help you and I'll help you and you'll collect the overtime and we'll rake in real well here. So I taught her some of the basics, and so she did some of the files as much as she could and then I would do them and then we would collect the overtime. And as soon as we started getting the big checks, we would start eating out more, like going to Outback and where she discovered Outback's teriyaki steak and wallaby darns. Um, when she discovered the wallaby darns, she wanted to learn how to make them at home so we could enjoy them in the evening. But at that time, it never occurred to us to try to search for it on the internet. I don't think the internet was being used as much as what it is now. But we tried to figure out what was in them, and then we bought the ingredients and started to experiment with them. The only problem was we couldn't do it all in one evening because we would get so drunk that we wouldn't remember what we'd put in the last one, and we just kept going. So we decided we had to spread it out. So for about a month, almost every night after work, we were experimenting with wallaby darns. It was a very uh, financially depleting hobby to have, but we certainly did enjoy it. We did all sorts of things together. We went to visit West Coast Choppers and actually met Jesse James, which was cool. And she tried to convince him that he really needed to have an ad with her posed upon a Harley, and that didn't go over too well. He didn't really spend too much time with us. He didn't really need to spend all that time with a couple of old ladies who were biker babe wannabes. So we didn't spend much time there. She wanted to go to the beach when we were in Long Beach, and so I took her to the beach, and it was just filled with all kinds of paraphernalia and trash and garbage. And she said that she now knew where she needed to come if she was ever running short of supplies. And I said, no, we're not going there. We're not going to do that. And so that beach didn't go over too well. But we did love to go on little trips together and do different things. And she didn't drive all that much when we were living in Southern California together, but she decided that she was going to go and visit with somebody that she met who lived a little ways away. And the consensus between us was is that she'd managed to drive all kinds of places by herself, doing all kinds of things before. Why couldn't she do it in Southern California? So she got out a map and she plotted her way, and then she got lost. And she didn't want to call me because she knew I had to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But she didn't even know if she was going to get home by 4 o'clock in the morning to give me the car because she was lost in Corona. And when she came home, she walked in and she had all these paper napkins and with notes on all these napkins. And she says, "You have to write this up." So I put them all together and wrote a story about you can't get there from here. Once you're in Corona, you can never leave. And I put it in my book, That Reminds Me, and then I've published it several times since then. But it is very funny. She was a very funny person. She used to do this baby thing with her eyes or something whenever I was upset, and I would always start laughing. She always had a way of making me laugh, no matter how bad the situation or no matter what was going on. She always managed to make me laugh. Um, Carolyn loved her kids. She would have done, if she'd been a multimillionaire, she would still have had nothing because she would have given it all to her kids. She and I had talked several times about her coming and living with me again, even though I'm 3,000 miles away. But she could never do that because she could not leave her children. So anybody who ever says to me that she wasn't a devoted mom needs to think again because she was totally, um, totally in wanting to be there and do for them and try to help them, even if she didn't feel like she was much of a help. She never felt like she was much of a role model to her kids. But I don't know. Sometimes I think that just the fact that a parent is there is the best kind of role model you can be. And her kids loved her as well. But I think that all you have to do is look back and see all the different things that she's done that most parents wouldn't do. I mean, she put on that 49ers thing for Marcy's class, and I know that she was like always wanting to do things for them. And it wasn't just her kids, it was my kids too. It didn't matter whose kid it was, she would do anything for any of them. If the kids were going to go on a field trip, she was always the one that the kids wanted to have pack her lunch. You didn't want Aunt Linda to pack it because Aunt Linda would give them celery sticks and carrot sticks and maybe some peanut butter and a peanut butter sandwich and, tuna salad or whatever. But when Aunt Carrot packed the lunch, it was Hostess snowballs and Twinkies and every kind of chip you can think of, and a couple cans of soda and some candy, and oh, let's not forget the beef sticks. And there was absolutely nothing healthy in that lunch, and the kids loved it, and they they knew that was the difference between us. Um, we were interchangeable moms, and I do love her kids as much as I love my own. Um, I haven't been able to be there for them as much as I would like to be, but they have always been there for me. And they have, you kids have no idea how very much that is important to me. The night before Carolyn died, we spent the night talking about things that did not matter at all about anything. We talked about um, Mark and Richard and my friend Bill and Elaine and all kinds of things. She talked to me about Penny and Jennifer and Marcy and Joe and Rick, about all of her kids. And when it was time, I knew she was getting tired, and I said, I think I should hang up and you should get some rest. And she said, no, don't hang up. She says, just keep talking. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And she said, talk to me about anything. And so I talked and I talked. And I finally heard her snore. And I thought, well, okay, so it's okay to hang up now. Every phone conversation we'd ever had always ended with, I love you, except that one. It didn't end with, I love you, because she was asleep. But before she fell asleep, she made me promise to call her the next day. She says, call me in the morning when you wake up. And I said, Carolyn, I wake up at 6 a.m. my time, which is, 3 a.m. your time. And she said, just call me. I didn't call. I felt it was more important for her to sleep. I didn't know she was going home. I didn't know Marcy was going to pick her up. I didn't know it would be the last phone call we'd ever have. Carolyn, I miss you. I miss you more than anything in the world. And the only thing that makes this better is my belief that you are now with other people who love you very much, and that you're there with our son Brian and mom and dad and Richard, Bruce, your mom, and all the other people who've gone before us. So rest easy. You've been in pain for a long time. and it's over now. And you can rest easy. I love you kids. Goodbye.